Hello, good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. I'm Gordon Ross. Today the European Union has agreed to delay Brexit by up to 6 months until October the 31st. Mrs May has agreed the delay in the early hours of the morning at an EU summit in Brussels, ending the risk that Britain would leave the bloc without a deal on Friday, but providing little new information on how she will resolve the country's biggest political crisis in more than 70 years. European Council President Donald Tusk has long tried to keep a door open for Britons to change their minds and stay, said that the delay until Halloween gave time for London to ratify May's deal, to tweak elements of the future EU-UK relationship to Labour's liking, or to give a chance to cancel Brexit altogether, while Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel, who eased tensions at the start of talks by sharing a joke with May over photographs of them both wearing similar jackets, stressed the need for calm and order. "We want an orderly Brexit by Britain," she said, "and an orderly Brexit by Britain can best be ensured if we give it some time." We should now see some video.
Thank you, Ben. Mr. President, dear friends, tonight the European Council decided to grant the United Kingdom a flexible extension of the Article 50 period until the 31st of October. This means an additional 6 months for the UK. During this time, the course of action will be entirely in the UK's hands. It can still ratify the withdrawal agreement, in which case the extension will be terminated. It can also reconsider the whole Brexit strategy. That might lead to changes in the political declaration, but not in the withdrawal agreement. Until the end of this period, the UK will also have the possibility to revoke Article 50 and cancel Brexit altogether. The UK will continue its sincere cooperation as a full member state with all its rights and as a close friend and trusted ally in the future. Let me finish with a message to our British friends. This extension is as flexible as I expected and a little bit shorter than I expected, but it's still enough to find the best possible solution. Please do not waste this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And now President Juncker of the European Commission.
Oui, bonjour.
Good morning, everybody. I've just met with Donald Tusk, the President of the European Council, where I agreed an extension to the Brexit process to the end of October at the latest. I continue to believe we need to leave the EU with a deal as soon as possible. And vitally, the EU have agreed that the extension can be terminated when the withdrawal agreement has been ratified, which was my key request of my fellow leaders. For example, this means that if we're able to pass a deal in the first 3 weeks of May, we will not have to take part in European elections and will officially leave the EU on Saturday, the 1st of June. During the course of the extension, the European Council is clear that the UK will continue to hold full membership rights as well as its obligations. As I said in the room tonight, there is only a single tier of EU membership with no conditionality attached beyond existing treaty obligations. Let me conclude by saying this. I know that there is huge frustration from many people that I had to request this extension. The UK should have left the EU by now, and I sincerely regret the fact that I have not yet been able to persuade Parliament to approve a deal which would allow the UK to leave in a smooth and orderly way. But the choices we now face are stark and the timetable is clear. So we must now press on at pace with our efforts to reach a consensus on a deal that is in the national interest. Tomorrow I will be making a statement to the House of Commons. Further talks will also take place between the government and the opposition to seek a way forward. I do not pretend that the next few weeks will be easy or there is a simple way to break the deadlock in Parliament, but we have a duty as politicians to find a way to fulfil the democratic decision of the referendum, deliver Brexit and move our country forward. Nothing is more pressing or more vital. I'll take a few questions. Laura?
Thank you, Prime Minister. BBC News. You said just a few days ago, as Prime Minister, I could not consider a delay further beyond the 30th of June, except that is exactly what you have agreed here in the early hours. You know many people are going to be very furious about another pause to Brexit, but why should people consider that you are still the person to preside over this?
Well, look, what we have agreed tonight means that we can actually leave the European Union before the 30th of June. What we need is to ensure that we have an agreement in Parliament, that we can get through and get the necessary legislation ratified to enable us to leave. I want us to leave the EU with a deal, so it's an orderly exit, as soon as possible. This decision enables us to do that. Beth.
Thank you. Beth Rigby, Sky News. Prime Minister, yesterday 177 of your party refused to support your extension plan when it ran to June the 30th, let alone October the 31st. How can you still in good conscience remain the leader of the Conservative Party after agreeing this extension tonight?
What I'm working to do is to ensure that as a government, a Conservative Party in government, we deliver on the result of the referendum, that we deliver Brexit for the people of the United Kingdom. What this extension enables us to do is to go through the process that we've set up, to enable Parliament to come to a majority opinion on the way forward so that we can get that deal ratified and leave the European Union. And I want to do that as soon as possible. If we're able to do that before the 22nd of May, then we don't have to hold those European parliamentary elections. Anybody else? Jason?
That was the Prime Minister there responding to the media last night. Now, in Westminster today, Ian Blackford, the SNP Westminster leader, has pressed Theresa May to heed the message of the EU Council President Donald Tusk not to waste any more time, and renewed the SNP's call to use the extension for a second referendum with the option to remain on the ballot paper as a means of finally ending the Brexit impasse. And we should hear from Ian Blackford shortly.
Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of her statement. Mr. Speaker, what a total fiasco the past few weeks, months and years have been under this shambolic Tory government. The UK did not leave the EU in March, and thankfully, given the efforts of SNP politicians and others in this place, and the goodwill of the European Union, we will not crash out of the EU on Friday. What an irony that it's the European Union that's got the UK out of this mess. Let that be a lesson for members in this place. It is the EU that has put the interest of our citizens in the UK first, our businesses, our farmers and our fishermen. We should not be lambasting the EU, we should be thanking them. With the European Union agreeing to a further extension to Article 50, the Prime Minister must use this time to hold a second EU referendum with the option of remaining on the ballot paper. It is now a very real possibility that we can remain in the European Union. Mr. Speaker, there were a total of 133 days between the 1997 general election and the devolution referendum in Scotland. As of today, there are 204 days until the new Brexit deadline on the 31st of October. So will the Prime Minister now remove the ridiculous excuse that there isn't enough time to hold a second referendum with remain on the ballot paper? Scotland did not vote for Brexit and should not be forced to accept any Brexit deal that will harm our interests. The only way forward is to put the decision back to the people. Scotland will not support a Brexit deal cooked up by the Brexit-supporting Labour and Tory parties. So, Mr. Speaker, let me ask this. Prime Minister, yesterday you ducked and dived my questioning, so a simple yes or no will suffice. Has your government offered a second EU referendum in talks with the Labour Party? Yes or no? Has the Labour Party requested a second EU referendum in the talks? Yes or no? Is the Labour Party cozying up to the Tories, asking to end freedom of movement as a price for their support for a Tory deal? Yes or no? And finally, Mr. Speaker, Will the Prime Minister recognise that she cannot fix this mess alone? Stop ignoring the people of Scotland. Open up meaningful discussions with the devolved governments and with civic society. Start leading by listening, Prime Minister, and please get her head out of the sand.
Leader at Westminster giving us a very good account of himself there. And now to Nicola Sturgeon. The First Minister has written today a letter to the Prime Minister following the extension of Article 50 until the end of October. The First Minister has said it's essential now that this time is used constructively and not wasted, and she has called for ongoing talks over the EU exit to include the devolved administrations, and for any deal agreed by the UK Parliament to be put to a second referendum. In her letter, the First Minister reiterated her concerns that the PM does not seem willing to drop her red lines, despite repeated defeat of her proposals. Ms Sturgeon went on, "We now have the gift of more time from the EU, and that must be used constructively to reset the UK government approach. Your ongoing talks with the Leader of the Opposition should now broaden the talks to include other parties, the devolved administrations, business and civic society, and to open up a range of options on the table in an effort to reach a genuine consensus. If such talks are to stand any chance of success, then you must be prepared to recognise in particular that it is essential for Scotland at the very least to stay in the single market and to continue to benefit from freedom of movement. Further and more fundamentally, the Scottish Government considers that any deal agreed by the UK Government should be put to another referendum, with the alternative proposition on the ballot paper being to remain in the EU. The extension to the 31st of October provides enough time to do this, and it is essential that no time is lost in the making of necessary preparations. I urge you to convene an urgent cross-party and cross-administration discussion to agree how to use the time we have been given." Those are the comments of the First Minister today in her letter. And now on to more local news. In Clydebank, a one-year-old girl has died after falling from the window of a flat in Dumbarton Road in Clydebank. Police Scotland have confirmed that the one-year-old girl who fell from the window of a flat in Clydebank on Wednesday, the 10th of April 2019, has died in hospital. The incident occurred around 2:10 on Wednesday, the 10th of April, when the child fell from the window of a third-floor flat on Dumbarton Road, near to the Boquaran Road in Clydebank. She was taken by ambulance to the Royal Hospital for Sick Children in Glasgow, where she later died. A report will be submitted to the Procurator Fiscal. Inquiries are ongoing to establish the full circumstances surrounding what happened. However, there do not appear to be any suspicious circumstances at this time. Detective Inspector Steve Martin from the Family Protection Unit based at Clydebank said, "The little girl's family have been left devastated by the loss of their child, and we are investigating the circumstances surrounding what happened. I continue to appeal for anyone who was in the area at the time who may have rendered assistance to the family or emergency services to please get in touch. And I would also ask any motorists who were in the vicinity to check their dash cams in case they have captured anything which may be of significance. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Family Protection Unit based at Clydebank Police Station via the 101 number, quoting incident number 1888 of Wednesday, the 10th of April 2019. And I can actually tell you on a personal note that I was travelling along that very road actually just around that time, but I unfortunately was, or fortunately was too far away to have witnessed this very sad event. And now on to more international news. And in Sudan, tens of thousands of people have danced and chanted anti-Bashir slogans in the streets of Khartoum today, following the news that the Sudanese president, Omar al-Bashir, has now been arrested. In an address on state television, the Defence Minister, Awad Mohammed Abed bin Auf, sorry, I've got a slight typographical error here. He said that Bashir, who is under arrest and in a safe place, and that military council was now running the country. Sudanese sources say that Bashir was at the presidential residence under heavy guard. He was finally ousted as Sudan's president by the military on Thursday following protests against his 30-year rule. Bashir has long been both a divisive and a pragmatic figure. He is a former paratrooper who seized power in a bloodless coup in 1989, when he dissolved the military council in 1993 and ruled with an iron fist. He survived multiple armed rebellions, economic crises, and attempts by the West to weaken him. The 75-year-old faces an international criminal court arrest warrant over the genocide charges of an estimated 300,000 people and extensive human rights abuses perpetrated by the Sudanese forces and civilians against civilians in Darfur. Against civilians in Darfur, the western region gripped by the conflict since 2003, when rebels took up arms against the government and accused it of discrimination and neglect. The United Nations says that 300,000 people have died in the conflict and 2.7 million people have fled their homes. Bashir held on to power as a shield against a trial similar to that of the former Yugoslav president Slobodan Milosevic. Bashir is the head of the Islamic Movement Party, which is a similar ideology to the global Islamist organization, the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay. He was also a master at playing rival factions amongst the security services, the military and the Islamists, and armed tribes against each other. But he underestimated the anger of the Sudanese men and women demanding an end to the economic hardships. And now moving to the Indian elections. And Indians voted enthusiastically on Thursday at the start of a mammoth general election, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi seeking a second term after campaigning fervently on a plank of national security, following tension with neighbouring Pakistan. Boosted by a surge in nationalist fervour after hostilities with Pakistan in February, opinion polls show Modi's Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party, or the BJP, had held the advantage going into the election. People trekked, rode bicycles and drove tractors to polling stations in the world's biggest democratic exercise, with nearly 900 million eligible to vote during 7 phases of balloting spread over 39 days, and vote counting set for May the 23rd. As voting began, Modi said the mood was firmly in favour of his National Democratic Alliance, whose senior party is the BJP. The NDA's aim is development, more development, and all-round development, he said on Twitter. Congress, which had promised more jobs and love over hate in its own rallying cry on Twitter, had wrested 3 key states from the BJP in state polls in December by promising to waive the outstanding loans of distressed farmers. It has sought allies amongst regional parties to defeat the BJP over its economic record, but pollsters say that support for the ruling party grew over Modi's tough stance against Pakistan. And now, moving on, forgive me, just jumping ahead a little bit. Okay, and now to the arrest in London today of WikiLeaks co-founder Julian Assange. He was arrested by the British police today on Thursday, that is today, after Ecuador terminated his asylum at its London embassy, where he had lived since 2012, to avoid extradition to Sweden over a sexual assault investigation. Police say they arrested Assange, 47, after being invited into the embassy following the Ecuadorian government's withdrawal of asylum. An agitated and frail-looking Assange with white hair and a white beard was carried head first out of the embassy by British police shortly after 9 a.m. to a waiting police van. Assange's lawyer, in Quito, Carlos Poveda, told reporters that asylum was terminated in reprisal for corruption allegations against Moreno, and that his life would be in danger if he is extradited to the United States, Moreno being the president of Ecuador. The United States has alleged that Assange engaged in a 2010 conspiracy with Chelsea Manning, who served 7 years in a military prison for leaking classified data, and charged him with conspiracy to commit computer intrusion with a maximum penalty of 5 years. WikiLeaks angered Washington by publishing hundreds of thousands of secret US diplomatic cables, which laid bare often highly critical US appraisals of world leaders, from the Russian President Vladimir Putin to members of the Saudi royal family. In 2010, WikiLeaks published a classified US military video showing a 2007 attack by Apache helicopters in Baghdad that killed a dozen people, including 2 Reuters news staff. Assange was offered refuge in 2012 in Ecuador by Ecuador's then-president Rafael Correa in June of 2012 to avoid being extradited to Sweden, where authorities wanted to question him as part of a sexual assault investigation. Sweden has dropped that probe Sweden has dropped that probe in 2017, but Assange was arrested for breaking the rules of his bail in London in connection with the case. A Swedish lawyer representing the alleged rape victim said that she would push to have prosecutors reopen the case, but a retired senior prosecutor and chairman of NGO Victim Support Sweden said that that would probably be difficult. In his relationship with Ecuador has soured under Correa's successor, Lenin Moreno, who said Assange violated the terms of his asylum. Moreno was angered after 5-year-old private photographs of him and his family taken when they lived in Europe were circulated on social media. His government said it believed that the photos were shared by WikiLeaks. Interior Minister Maria Paula Roma had told reporters in Quito, the interferences in matters of other states also includes the interference of Mr. Assange and his allied organisation in the internal political matters in Ecuador. Now, following his arrest, Sajid Javid made a statement in the Commons today.
Order. Statement, the Secretary of State for the Home Department. Secretary Sajid Javid.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a statement on the arrest of Julian Assange. This morning, after nearly 7 years inside the Ecuadorian embassy, Mr. Assange was arrested for failing to surrender in relation to his extradition proceedings. He was later also served with a warrant for provisional arrest, pending receipt of a request for extradition to stand trial in the United States on charges relating to computer offences. His arrest follows a decision by the Ecuadorian government to bring to an end his presence inside the embassy in London. I am pleased that President Moreno has taken this decision, and I extend the UK's thanks to him for resolving this situation. Ecuador's actions recognise that the UK criminal justice system is one in which rights are protected and in which, contrary to what Mr. Assange and his supporters may claim, he and his legitimate interests will be protected. This also reflects the improvements to the UK relationship with Ecuador under the government of President Moreno. These are a credit to the leadership of my right honourable friend, the Minister of State for Americas, and to the ongoing hard work of Foreign Office officials, both here in London and Quito. Mr. Assange was informed of the decision to bring his presence in the embassy to an end by the Ecuadorian ambassador this morning, shortly before 10 a.m. The Metropolitan Police entered the embassy for the purpose of arresting and removing him. All of the police's activities were carried out pursuant to a formal written invitation signed by the Ecuadorian ambassador and in accordance with the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. I would like to take this opportunity to also thank the Metropolitan Police for the professionalism that they have shown in dealing with the immediate situation and during the last 7 years. Both the UK government and the Ecuadorian government have become increasingly concerned about the state of Mr. Assange's health. The first action of the police following the arrest was to have him medically assessed and deemed fit to detain. The Ecuadorians have made their best efforts to ensure that doctors chosen by him have had access inside the embassy, and while he remains in the custody of the UK, we are now in a position to ensure access to all necessary medical facilities. Proceedings will now begin according to the court timetable. Under UK law, following the provisional arrest, the full extradition papers must be received by the judge within 65 days. A full extradition request would have to be certified by the Home Office before being submitted to the court, after which extradition proceedings would begin. At this point, the decision as to whether any statutory bars to extradition apply would be for the UK courts to determine. I will go no further in discussing the details of the accusations against Mr. Assange, either in the UK's criminal justice system or in the US. But I am pleased that the situation in the Ecuadorian embassy has finally been brought to an end. Mr. Assange will now have the opportunity to contest the charge against him in open court and to have any extradition request considered by the judiciary. It is right that we implement the judicial process fairly and consistently with due respect for equality before the law. I commend this statement to the House.
And that was Sajid Javid there with his statement in the House of Commons. In closing in this story, Julian Assange's supporters said that Ecuador had betrayed him at the behest of Washington and that termination of his asylum was illegal, and they feared he would ultimately end up on trial in the United States. And there we'll leave that story for just now. And now to New Zealand, where police expect tens of thousands of firearms in a guns buyback scheme. Lawmakers in New Zealand voted almost unanimously on Wednesday to change the gun laws less than a month after a lone gunman killed 50 people in attacks on 2 mosques in Christchurch. New Zealand police say that they expect tens of thousands of firearms to be surrendered in the guns buyback scheme under a scheme passed in Parliament in the wake of the country's worst peacetime mass shooting. The new legislation bars the circulation and use of most semi-automatic firearms, parts that convert firearms into semi-automatic firearms, and magazines over a certain capacity, and also some shotguns. This includes the gun used by the suspect in the Christchurch shooting. It granted an amnesty until September the 30th for people to surrender prohibited items. More than 300 weapons had already been handed in. The Deputy Police Commissioner Michael Clement told the news conference on Thursday that they are not quite sure how many guns they would receive, as New Zealand has no law requiring people to register firearms. The record of licences, there are approximately 1.2 to 1.5 million firearms in New Zealand. This is an estimate. Record of licences show that 13,500 firearms are military-style semi-automatics. The Commissioner, Michael Clement, said, "It's a great unknown question. Everyone appreciates that there is no register of firearms with regards to the type of firearms that we are talking about. So it could be in the tens of thousands, it could be more," he added. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern had estimated that the gun buybacks would cost the government between 100 and 200 million New Zealand dollars, approximately 52 to 103 million pounds. But other government ministers have warned that the costs could be higher depending on how many guns were handed to the police. Details are being worked out of the gun buyback scheme, and gun owners in possession of prohibited firearms are being urged to register online. Okay, and now moving on, we have a story about the Pope, or rather a story about church abuse. Okay, the former Pope Benedict has blamed the Catholic Church's sexual abuse scandal on the effects of the sexual revolution of the 1960 homosexual cliques and seminaries and what he called the general collapse of morality. Critics accused Benedict, who before becoming Pope in 2005 was for 23 years in charge of the Vatican Doctrinal Office, which has widely been criticised for handling of abuse cases, of trying to shift the blame away from the Church. But in a rare essay, he also said the Church's legal system had at times been overly protective of accused clerics, citing what he called judicial guarantees that were extended to such an extent that convictions were hardly possible. The 92-year-old, who in 2013 was the first Pope in 6 centuries to resign, argued that the sexual revolution had led some to believe paedophilia and pornography were acceptable. He also said that an openly gay culture in some Catholic seminaries meant that they had failed to train priests properly. Benedict was head of the Doctrinal Office when the first wave of abuse cases were exposed in Boston in 2002. but later as Pope he took action against some paedophiles that had been blocked during the reign of his predecessor, Pope John Paul. Okay, I would just like to make clear that there is no connection between the paedophilia and homosexuality that has ever been proved. Abuse scandals in Ireland, Chile, Australia, France, the USA, Poland, Germany and elsewhere have forced the Catholic Church to pay out billions of dollars in damages to victims and close parishes. Many cases date back decades before the 1960s. And finally, the Ring of Brodgar. The Ring of Brodgar in Orkney has been vandalised, and police in Orkney are appealing for information following damage caused to a standing stone at the Ring of Brodgar. The damage consists of graffiti which had been engraved into one of the stones at the Neolithic site in Stenness. It's believed to have been caused sometime between Friday afternoon, April the 5th, and Sunday morning, April the 7th. Officers are carrying out inquiries and are urging anyone with information to come forward. Inspector David Hall said, "The stones at the Ring of Brodgar are priceless historical artefacts and the damage caused cannot simply be estimated in monetary terms. For someone to damage them in this way is a particularly mindless act. I would urge anyone who has visited the area over the last weekend to think back, and if they believe they may have seen something suspicious, even if it didn't seem to be of much note at the time, please let us know. We would also urge the public to continue to be vigilant at this site and to report anything that could be of interest to the police immediately." The Ring of Brodgar was part of an enormous prehistoric ritual complex that incorporated the stones of Stenness, approximately 1 mile to the southeast, and probably the Ring of Buchan to the northwest. A short distance to the east of Brodgar Ring is a solitary standing stone known as the Comet Stone. The area surrounding the Ring of Brodgar and the entire Ness is rich with archaeology, including 4 massive mounds thought to have been created between 2500 BC and 1500 BC. During the New Year celebrations of yesteryear, lovers would visit Brodgar, where the man would fall to his knees and prayed to the god Woden that the couple keep their oaths that they were about to swear. And then they made their way up to the Odin stone where the oath ceremony would take place. Anyone who does have information on the vandalism of the stones can pass it to the Police Scotland by calling 101 and quoting the incident number NK 430/19 or call Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111. And that is about it from us at Scotland at 7. I'll be here again next Thursday when I'll anchor the show again. In the meantime, from all of us here at Broadcasting Scotland and the Scotland at 17, good night.